Accessing agent files. Brian Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now here's Brian.
Oh yes, the 2 hours of tech that just cannot be missed. Well, you can miss it if you want, but I guarantee listen, I listen to a lot of tech podcasts, and believe me, the stuff that gets said here is not getting said anywhere else, or at least not much of anywhere else that matters. So if you don't want to miss it, don't miss it. Come on, jump on it. I'm right here, the Libertine in Chief, ready for you. And let's, boy, so much to talk about. I want to open up first with saying that I've been honored to be invited to moderate the tech panel at Keenvention 2014. I also moderated the panel at Keenvention 2013. I'm really excited about that. Of course, also the producer of Sovryn Tech, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, will be moderating the Bitcoin panel at Keenvention 2014. I believe it's still at the Sovryn Hotel. You can go, that's in Keene, New Hampshire. You can go to keenvention.info to check that out. It's a great time. And you get to hear from people, and this is a good way to open up this show, because you get to hear from people doing something about it. They're doing something real. They're actually active in bringing more liberty and more freedom to themselves and others. It's really exciting. You really don't get that anywhere else, because most other, events that you go to, it's all blah, blah, blah. We petitioned, blah, 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 politics, blah, blah, bullshit. Because, right, that's what all that equates to. And here you get to hear about, real action happening. So if you want to check that out, keenvention.info, please come and see me. It's really a great time. Last year, the talk, it's available on YouTube, the panel that I hosted, and I thought it was really fantastic. And in fact, the Free State Project got a great write-up in Forbes by Kashmir Hill, outlining its importance in the Bitcoin space, its importance in the world of 3D printing, and even its importance in the realm of drones. And I'm not going to talk about that right now, but maybe that's something I'll talk about in Free Talk Live or in a future Sovryn Tech, is the peaceful use of drones, which I think there really can be and is. So anyway, also liberty.me. I am on liberty.me. You can find Brian Sovryn there. That is, of course, the kind of the Liberty social network that's being devised. I like it. I've used it for a bit. I think it's pretty cool. It is, of course, you have to pay to use it. There's a lot of great guides on there, a lot of really unique info that I think you can get on there. You can connect with people. It's got, the website, I think, has a great design. Just a lot of options there. There's great groups there. There's even like a Star Trek anarchist group. Oh, I thought that was cool. So, you can check it out. You can friend me on there if you haven't already, but I am there. There's also a crypto anarchy group. And actually, I noticed a lot of the people in the crypto anarchy group on liberty.me are actual listeners of this show, and honored. That's great. That's getting pushed forward. So anyway, rapid fire stories. Now that we're all done with that. We're not done. One more. PorcFest next week. That means you're going to be getting some double and triple loads coming up. Trust me. I'm going to get a lot of content out to you, but I'm going to be at Bitcoin in the Beltway next week. I'll be there. I think it's on Saturday, the 20th or something like that. I will be in Washington, D.C. That's right. The Golden Stallion will be in the belly of the beast that is the United States government. And I'll be on my best behavior, whatever the hell that means. But then right after that, so the next day, Sunday, we'll be flying back up. The lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I will be flying back up, and we will be at PorkFest for an entire week. And so don't hesitate to say hi to me there. And I'm not really speaking at all, but I will be talking. I will be involved in a talk with Paige Peterson of MaidSafe, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of decentralized technologies, which is really great because that's what I'm giving you a preview to some degree, because this episode is going to be all about real solutions, what you can do, what you can use to really get some serious anonymity and privacy and really fuck with the NSA and the FBI. But we've got a whole bunch of things to talk about. That's just one aspect of today's show. So I like to think I got a good blockbuster here lined up for you, and you're going to want to hear the whole thing through. So anyway, let's get into the rapid fire stories. Got some interesting stuff. Google is changing its mind about Origin Chip. Now, Origin Chip was, pretty much an API that was going to eliminate not necessarily eliminate the address bar, but it was supposed to be working towards that, or what in Chrome is known as the omnibar. And this would, really shorten the address you see, the URL, okay? All the actual address that you go to that ends with .html or whatever else it decides to end with. And they are backtracking on it, which is kind of weird because Apple's actually going forward with it. So are some other companies. And I don't know why they're backtracking on shortening the address. Now, I'm glad about this because when I first heard about Origin Chip, where they were going to shorten where they're trying to make, and browsers are doing this overall, where they're trying to make a lot of the code that you would normally see disappear. I didn't like it because for a security reason, and maybe this is Google's thinking, seeing the actual, this is so commonplace on Twitter, okay? Where it'll say, there's like a picture, because normally on Twitter, if there's a picture that was posted, it would say pic.twitter.com and then / whatever the address of the picture is. That was actually a real issue because what some people would do is it would say picm.twitter or something like that. They would change the address just by one letter. Okay. And then that one letter would, actually lead you to a whole other website, and who knows what's on that website, but it made it look like it was pic.twitter. So hiding the actual address of things, I think, is really, really dangerous because it doesn't let you see. Granted, this is, Origin Chip was a different case because this would be in the omnibar, but hiding it doesn't let you see where exactly you're going. And I think it's so important to pay attention to, HTML code. Now, when I was younger, 14, 15 years old and up a bit, it used to be really cool. Like you really wanted to pay attention to the HTML code because if you went to a porn site, they would put stuff behind a paywall. But really, if you just figured out like the number sequence of, say, the .jpg that you actually were, taken to in the address bar, you could just change the number and then you'd know where the actual hidden URL was that you could go to. So, so paying attention to URLs can be helpful, right? But these days, with so much with XML and everything, like a lot of the address can't really help you. But knowing those first few lines, making sure you're going to, say, actual wikipedia.com instead of wiki whatever .org is really a good thing to keep an eye on. So you don't want to lose that. So I'm actually kind of glad Google's not going forward with this, even though I know there is supposed to be security certificates, but all that's based on extensions that can easily be hacked and whatever, or cracked. And I just don't like it. I like people to see the code as much as they can, as much as they want to handle. Let's see, another Google story. Alamo Drafthouse Cinema, this is a huge cinema chain around the U.S., is banning Google Glass from its theaters. Now, of course, they're not doing this because they're concerned about the attention span of the bulk of humanity. They're doing this because they don't want people recording movies while they're sitting there watching them wearing Google Glass. This is going to be a huge issue. I'll admit, I didn't even think about this, that people would be wearing Google Glass into theaters and they'd be able to record with, some relatively good quality, the movie that they're watching. So this is a big issue. I'm curious how this is going to work. What's probably going to happen is, and this is happening already with some other Google Glass apps or some other apps out there where you're going to walk into a theater and Google Glass is going to get deactivated. And if that alone isn't a warning sign for that technology, I don't know what is. But anyway, that's happening, and I guess that really shouldn't come off as a shock. Also, I thought just a little bit of history here. I think it's not funny, but it's funny now. But the U.S., this is again, this is history, as in this is something that happened in 1961. But did you know that the U.S. almost nuked North Carolina? Yeah. Totally serious. A B-52, pretty much. I mean, seriously, like a bomb landed. It was so bad. And fortunately, the crash of it deactivated the arming switch on this nuke. And thankfully, it did not go off. But essentially, I mean, Goldsboro, North Carolina had 2 bombs fall on it. Hey, what? Why are we trusting these people with anything? Oh, well, that was, 50 years ago. Okay, yeah, because we're not using B-52s anymore. Oh, wait. Anyway, I thought that was so unbelievable. Really, that kind of destructive force belongs in the hands of no one. I'm not saying that it can't necessarily be developed, even though I wish people wouldn't want to, but that it really doesn't belong in the hands of anybody else. Also, kind of a follow-up from a rapid fire story last week. Is that the Earth, they found out, we talked about how apparently there's a study that shows, quote unquote, proves, strong word, that the Earth and the moon were created by a collision from another planet that swooped into the solar system, shy of 5 billion years ago, or 4.5 billion years ago. And the interesting thing about that is that now, because of that data, they realize that the Earth is actually a good 60 million or so years older. The Earth and the moon are a good 60 million years older than originally believed. So this does put them closer to the 5 billion year range. And you say, well, that's not a whole lot of a big difference. But really, when you start adding in, those amounts of millions of years, that does make for a huge change in the understanding of a lot of things. Does that raise into question a lot of carbon dating or whatever? No, even that part of it doesn't necessarily interest me. But I'm still just positively fascinated at how now, I mentioned Zecharia Sitchin last week and how it's amazing that he was told he was crazy that, a planet could swoop into the solar system and not stay there and end up just leaving. And now we find out that that's exactly what occurred. It's really something. Again, I don't believe that aliens have ever visited the Earth. I don't think they've ever even been in our solar system unless somehow unless there was life on Mars, which we found water there, right? So who knows? But that kind of crap has never happened. But the intriguing thing is that before these theories, okay, the giant impact theory, the idea that the moon was created by a collision, this whole idea that they're propagating now is saying that the study shows is accurate. The fact that he didn't theorize it, he talked about it years and years before anybody theorized about it, but he didn't get it. He's not a scientist. He didn't get it from the science books. And again, it wasn't even in the science books for him to glean it from, but he got it from historical records. He got it from cuneiform tablets. Okay. And hieroglyphs. That's weird. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying there's aliens, because there fucking isn't, okay? At least not in our territory, not in our neck of the woods. But I'm just saying that that's pretty weird. That someone could guess all this stuff. That's not all he guessed. He knew that the color of Neptune was blue, and you could say, well, lucky guess. Maybe. But it's in the, it's in the text, or it's in the tablets. It's in the clay tablets. So anyway, I found this whole story is really fascinating to me. How science is now having to turn back on its own previous laughing stock. Moving on. So what I want to talk about the main story this week, and this is going to be relevant to the whole show, I think, is I want to, and look, I'm going to be on Sovryn Tech. I can do this. It's my show. I get to speculate when I want to speculate. All right. But the important thing is that, as always, you separate speculation from fact. And I am warning you well ahead of time on this episode of Sovryn Tech that I am going to be doing some heavy speculation. And here is the heavy speculation that I want to get into with you. And this has to do with Apple. And, Apple had a big week, WWDC. Everybody went nuts about it. Obviously, they came up with a new language, Swift, which is, pretty much C without the semicolons, right? But I mean, it looks good. Swift, I have no problem with people coming up with new programming languages. Maybe they shouldn't be based off of C, but I have no problem with there being new programming languages. I think that's fantastic. Okay, you had that come out. There's a whole slew of real privacy features put into iOS 8 and Yosemite, not even talking about the fact that now suddenly Yosemite looks like Windows Vista, right? Oh, Vista, oh, that's so ugly. Let's put it in the new Apple interface that's supposed to be the most beautiful thing on planet Earth, and everybody will go crazy about it. It's really true that the tech media in general has this absolute love affair with Apple, and Apple seemingly can almost do no wrong. It was a point that was made by one blogger last week that, Google talks about how they're spending billions of dollars on satellites and getting internet out to everybody. But Apple changes their font, and everybody's talking about the Apple changing their font. It's like, who the fuck cares? It's like, wait a minute, we're going to have satellites going up that can spread internet to the entire planet. But holy shit, Apple just changed their fonts. They're going with Helvetica. That's the big news. Come on. Anyway, moving on. I'm not anti-Apple, by the way. So a lot of this stuff, I think, lends to a really interesting point, because what's happening here is, in fact, speaking of Google spreading around the internet to everybody, there is this great concern with trying to sell products, because a lot of these companies are running into the issue to where, especially like Apple, where not every, a lot of people are still using the iPad 2. And we're what, 3-4 generations ahead of that now? And a lot of people, they can't find anybody, and Apple's trying to break into China. Everybody's trying to break into China because China is just this untapped consumerist paradise, to sell a bunch of shit to. And I think, a lot of people want to, they want to get all this, get this out there to all of those people in these other countries, okay, to be able to keep their margins up and keep selling more and more product, every year as it comes out. And so I think that might be I guarantee you, for Google, Facebook, of course, in Google and Facebook's case, it's not necessarily product. It's about getting advertisements out to people because that's their bread and butter. But, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, their whole purpose in wanting to get, or at least, and we're going to talk about how Apple's doing this, but to get the internet out to everybody is just to sell more. It is not to somehow bring up, these disparate populations across the world. It is literally to just be able to sell more and more product. Okay. And maybe there's something a little bit more to that. We'll talk about it in a minute. So you have Google, who's buying, and Facebook, who've bought drone companies, okay, to spread internet to the, what do they call it? The bottom 2 billion, not the other 6 billion. I know that phrase. That's common, right? But there's actually there's a phrase, the bottom 2 billion, that refers to the people that don't even have toilets. To get it out to them, you have Google, of course, with Project Loon, where they're going to put balloons out there that will transmit internet speeds, say at like 3G around there, to all the disparate parts of the earth. You have satellites now. Google's putting up satellites. In fact, Google just invested $30 million into, which seems like a small amount of money these days now, but $30 million to Virgin Galactic. You better believe that's to get those $2 billion worth of satellites up. Okay. And so there's this big push to get the internet spread out, to get the internet all across the world. Now, Google and Facebook are doing what they're doing. Okay. And Google would seemingly be doing the most. But the interesting thing is to wonder, okay, now how does this affect Apple? Okay. Because, a lot of people would say that the big war right now is between Apple and Google. Okay. And, maybe Facebook's a third, Microsoft's a fourth, and Amazon's just like they're kind of lying in wait, it would seem. But we'll talk about Amazon next week after they do their announcement on the 18th. But how does this apply to Apple? If Apple at WWDC is baking in, and again, in iOS 8 and Yosemite, all of these things where they're de-Googleizing their products en masse. Like the search uses Bing and DuckDuckGo now, which kudos to Apple for putting in DuckDuckGo and taking them seriously. I love DuckDuckGo. Fantastic. Also, you have one of the major features announced with Apple was that if there's an iPhone nearby, Yosemite, your Mac and your Mac Pro or Mac Air or whatever will automatically detect that there's an iOS device nearby that has a internet connection via 3G or 4G, and it will automatically start tethering. Of course, if the mobile provider you go through allows for it. If you're paying the price or if you have it jailbroken or whatever, and you can do it for free. So, and that's a pretty cool setup, but clearly through WWDC with all of the, the innovations and the privacy features. And again, they're doing really, really well about bringing in all these privacy features. And then at the same time, opening up iOS to other developers and getting them involved. That's part of the reason they came out with the Swift programming language. Okay. So that there's this unified language that everybody can get in and still be secure. So I think it's pretty clear that Apple's trying to open up their ecosystem even more, even though it's already, obviously the App Store for iOS has been really, successful. Okay. And that's not to say that's what Apple wanted, that they even like the idea of an App Store, but it's been really, really successful. And so in opening all this stuff up, because this is what Facebook was talking about at F8 this year, where they said they wanted to be a platform. Well, now Apple is doing everything they can, it seems, to be a platform. Google is trying to they just seem to be buying out companies. And this is kind of what brought to mind what I'm about to tell you, is when Google bought Skybox Imaging just this past week for $500 million. Now, this is a company it's a satellite company, and they take satellite images all the time. Okay, so now Google Maps, the initial thing that people think is that, well, now Google Maps will be able to take pictures, like every couple days instead of every few years, which used to be how Google Maps worked, at least from the satellite aspect of it, or how Google Earth worked. Now, Apple was supposedly going to be purchasing Skybox. There was talks about that, and to enhance Apple Maps, because Apple still takes Apple Maps pretty seriously, even though when iOS 7 came out, they allowed for Google Maps to get re-implemented due to popular demand. I mean, they to some degree, they didn't have a choice if they wanted to keep a lot of their customers happy. And so when I saw this, I was like, okay, so they wanted Skybox Imaging, but now they don't. But what was the whole point of that? I can understand they want to make Apple Maps better, and owning Skybox would have done it. It would have been a huge boon to making Apple Maps a lot better. And then I remembered something we've talked about on this show before, okay, was FireChat, made by OpenGarden. Great stuff. I love FireChat, love OpenGarden. Great company, okay? And how they're doing that is through this ability that they put into newer iOS devices that also we learned at WWDC. Again, I'm painting a picture here for you. Some of these devices don't have this, and they're no longer supported, but they will no longer be supported by iOS 8. This is important. And it's the multi-peer connectivity framework. And this allows for Apple devices to communicate without any internet whatsoever. Okay. Now, you take that into account. What exactly are they doing there? And then what is Facebook and Google doing? All these people are trying to interconnect the world to get their stuff out there and to provide internet out there. And then I think it's pretty fair to say, and this is the part where you may think the Golden Stallion's gone a little nuts, but I think these companies, remember in the 80s when a lot of movies like RoboCop, not the new one, the original one, where it was all about, just corporations taking over everything. I think to some degree, a lot of these, and I've talked about this with Amazon, where these companies really do want to take over everything. And they do want to be kind of all powerful. And pay attention for listener email, because we're going to talk about the original company that tried to pull this off. And so if a company's purpose is to try and get everybody interconnected, okay, to get everybody using their products and sell more product via, if they're selling more product or advertising, what is Apple's answer to what Facebook and Google are doing? And I think it's this multi-peer connectivity framework. I think their idea is to literally, they're not going to use satellites. They're not going to use, balloons. They're not going to use any of that. In fact, they might not even use hard lines. I think Apple's planning on connecting the entire world through just devices, through a gigantic mesh network. Okay? And they can pull this off. They really can. I think this is their way of doing things. And it's a really great way of doing it because it's inexpensive. Google's hashing out billions of dollars to be able to interconnect the world, as to where Apple's clientele already make billions of dollars and they travel the whole world and they're just spreading the internet with them as they go along, or they're spreading the Apple services as they go along. Again, Apple seems to be localizing a lot of things. They're almost getting away from the internet as we know it. Like now they offer iCloud, where all your stuff just goes on iCloud, which ironically maybe its backend, maybe Microsoft Azure. That's not weird at all. Okay. But I feel like Apple might be, to some degree, creating their very own, how do we get the internet out to everybody? That's how they do it. They're going to do it by devices alone, and they're going to do it through mesh networking. Now, like I said, you might think I'm nuts in the idea that these companies want to really take over the world, but I think it's so. They want, they kind of want one ring to rule them all, and this is Apple's answer to so much of this. They're securing everything down, seemingly from, of course you have to trust Apple with it, but a lot of the security measures they're taking are very much anti-NSA. They're very much anti-government. They are totally pro-Apple in what they're doing, and they are eliminating other companies from the picture, making sure they're not a part of it. And so in the very long term, that UFO building in Cupertino that they're, Campus 2 that they're building. This could be the central hub of, this entire gigantic mesh network. And they're totally, and it's honestly, I think it's genius, because satellite internet is imperfect. It's incredibly imperfect. Project Loon is a much better idea. The drones are a much better idea. Now, maybe it's going to be a combination of all those things, where the satellites will beam down, whatever data to the drone, and then the drone sends it down to everybody else to use. Okay. But Apple's system of doing it, I think, is incredible. It's decentralized to some degree, except for the fact that, again, you have to count on Apple. But it's decentralized. It's hardy. There's not much that can get in the way of it. Bluetooth is improving constantly. There's Wi-Fi directors. All multi-peer connectivity framework allows for so much. Okay. And then there's no reliance on anybody. There's no reliance on AT&T, and AT&T, boy, they're making a bid for the same thing, where AT&T is almost Ma Bell again. I don't know how there's not antitrust laws going on against, maybe they won't let them buy out DirecTV, because AT&T is going to buy out DirecTV for $50 billion or something, some crazy amount of money that they don't even have. So there's this huge push right now going on for one company to be providing all of this mobile connectivity around the world. Okay. But the difference here, the reason why Apple might do so well in this is because you have to grasp this. Facebook and Google require the influx of money from other companies. Okay. They need to push advertisements for other companies. That's their business model. So they can't provide privacy in the first place. We've already talked about that on Sovereign Tech before. Apple and Microsoft never required advertising. They never required advertising dollars to flow into their business to get to become, the multi-billion dollar companies that they are. They just built, quote unquote, great products and got them out there to people. That's all they need to do. Okay. So they can actually, so my point in bringing that up is that Apple can do this really slowly as to where Google has to move very, very fast. So does Facebook. These other companies are in this big rush to get advertising out to you as fast as they possibly can, to get as much money into them as fast as they possibly can, because I think a lot of that is all going to crash and burn. And this is the big point. Why are these companies trying to all create their own, their own personal internets? And yes, let's stop using the word internets like it's something that Southern people say. Okay, no offense to Southern people. I love you. I used to live down south. Let's stop making that a word that gets used by quote unquote dumb people in the media. Internets is a real thing. We need multiple internets. And I think Silicon Valley knows this because Silicon Valley is in a bubble and it's going to crash and burn. And so even all this advertising that Google keeps getting, I think those dollars at some point very soon are going to just disappear. And so they're moving as fast as they can. But Apple can really do this right. If they want to interconnect the world, they can do this right. They've already got the customer base that's traveling around the world all the time, spreading that internet signal everywhere they go. And they can do it slowly, which is how you really build things like Bitcoin. It took years, and it's still taking time to be the monolithic infrastructure that it is. Apple can do the same thing, and they can take all the time in the world. They don't have to worry about boom and busts. They don't have to worry about making sure, hey, are we getting in enough advertising dollars? Because they do it just by selling great products. Okay, but they do need to be selling more of those things. And so that's why they want this interconnectivity, but they're doing it in the best way. They're doing real mesh networking, and I think that's a huge part of a lot of the features that we saw got added into iOS 8 and Yosemite. It's really key to them becoming this gigantic mesh networking. And maybe they're wanting to be so big, they want to be bigger than governments themselves. I think a lot of people think Google already is, though, Snowden revelations may say differently. But like Apple's just going crazy on the privacy push and on the cryptography push. They really are after WWDC. And now suddenly they decide to say, hey, virtual currencies are accepted by Apple. Yeah, I think we're starting to see where a lot of these companies are wanting to, again, they're wanting to be Sauron. They're wanting to be the One Ring. And honestly, the way things are shaping up for Apple, they're doing it the right way. And Google and Facebook are really making a mistake, and their business model just isn't going to allow for it. I don't think the tech is there. Though I could be wrong, and all of this was just rampant speculation. But Apple might take over the world, unless it's going to be Amazon. I'll be back with more. This is Sovereign Tech.
We're on the brink of a global finance paradigm shift, and at the core of this movement, Bitcoin. But many early adopters need a safe, stable, and secure method of storing Bitcoin that doesn't require an electronic device. Enter crypto cards, the world's first BIP38 passphrase encrypted, laser-etched aluminum offline wallets. Crypto cards are the same size as a credit card, only they're scratch-resistant, waterproof, and flame-resistant up to 600 degrees. Unlike paper wallets, they won't ever rip, fade, or crumple, and the high-density aluminum is rated to last 75 years. Your coins will be secure for as long as you need. Having Bitcoin physically allows you to store them in a secure location instead of on a networked computer. This is key. Your funds will be impervious to hacks and the negligence of third parties. It's a truly trustless system. You hold the keys, you hold the funds. For more info, visit cryptocards.co. We ship worldwide, and using the code FTL, you'll save 10%. We're proud to be part of a liberty-oriented movement, and the future is looking bright.
Hello, Mr.
Sovryn. Brian Sovryn. And yours?
Natalia. Care to play a game of roulette?
I'd love to.
Number and color?
69. Black.
As you wish. Tech Roulette.
Oh, yes. It is time for Tech Roulette, where I cover stories that get sent in to me through the various channels available. It could be Twitter. It could be, via email, sovereigntech@riseup.net, which is the best way to get info to me. Though maybe it's not the best way. Maybe it won't always be the best way. And why do I say that? Because maybe there's other venues that we need to be looking at as far as people that are concerned about our privacy, people that want a decentralized world, and still have our tech. And that's what I want to talk about. And I'd gotten a couple people actually asked about this. One of them was actually via Twitter, where they're asking about, hey, maybe at some point you could talk about this. Kind of a listener email to some degree, I suppose. But, we're doing it for Tech Roulette. And they said, maybe you could talk about Freenet. Maybe you could talk about I2P. Maybe you could talk about Tor and services like that. Which one do you use? And what these are, this is the deep web. This is the dark web. Okay. They're not necessarily dark nets. That's kind of a different term. A dark net is an internet that sort of exists completely on its own away from the internet and allows for some degree of world interconnectivity. It's a great thing. And so I want to talk about these because this is important. This is action that can be taken. These are things that people can do right now. These technologies presently exist. Okay. So when I use the word dark web, or maybe I should just use the word internets. Okay. But that's what I mean, is that something that is not our average, TCP IP implementation that we use now to go to Facebook. Okay. Or to go to whatever website, or that goes to Wikipedia or whatever. Okay. Now, some would say the ultimate implementation of a lot of this would be MaidSafe. Okay. And if you don't know about MaidSafe, I've got a MaidSafe special that you can find at sovereigntech.com with the creator, David Irvine, class act guy, a real hero, in my opinion. And, you can listen to that and you'll find out about MaidSafe. And, but real quick, MaidSafe is essentially software that you would put on your computer. You would allocate a certain amount of hard drive space, and then that would create an entire network with your computer, providing a little bit of CPU power, providing a little bit of hard drive space, and all of that will allow for a network that shreds data, encrypts data, and spreads it all around. It's a giant. You're creating a giant sandbox internet. Okay, and the sand, never makes a complete picture wherever it goes. Okay, and so MaidSafe is a fantastic thing, and it allows for you to run apps within MaidSafe. You can have websites within MaidSafe, and you can get paid throughout all of it. It's incredible. I can't wait for it. One of the most, if not the most exciting technology to come out in quite some time. It may be bigger than Bitcoin, even though David Irvine himself will tell you that the fact that blockchain technology was so readily accepted by a lot of the tech community, that was proof that he felt that the world was ready for MaidSafe, because he's been developing MaidSafe for years and years, 6-7 years, if not longer. So there's MaidSafe, but that's not out yet. So what can we use now? What can we do now? How can Golden Stallion, I want my privacy. I don't want to be, you talk about how maybe the internet itself is flawed, how the server-based systems are flawed. Everything is broken. What's not broken? What can I use right now to take control of my digital life, or to be able to interact with people that I want to without having Facebook looking at everything I do? Okay. That's what we're going to talk about. And so the first one I'll mention is Freenet. Okay, now Freenet is, some would say, is very similar to MaidSafe. In fact, the major drastic difference between what I described that MaidSafe does and that Freenet does, as far as I know, Freenet doesn't necessarily shred the info and necessarily spread it all around. The info will go around to a bunch of different nodes, okay, but Freenet has had some issues where that data isn't always necessarily accessible, as I understand it. Someone can email me and correct me, okay? And Freenet also, it doesn't have the incentivized system within it, like where MaidSafe has SafeCoin that incentivizes people to develop. You get paid for developing for it. Okay. So, MaidSafe is a for-profit company and Freenet is a non-for-profit. That's not a bad thing. Neither of them is a bad thing. I'm just saying that Freenet doesn't seem to have that the incentives to really get people using it and involved in it. Okay. So, and Freenet wasn't, it is to some degree anonymizing. It's not really a darknet in the sense that, it operates outside of the internet. It can do that now. I think in 2008, they sort of changed everything up to where it was capable of doing that. But Freenet's, it's pretty nice. Using it, I thought it actually felt a little, not for me, but for the average user, when I look at it, I thought Freenet looked a little complex to really handle, but it exists for, all kinds of systems, and you can jump on it and you can check it out. But it's not my first choice. And if I wanted to have another internet free, or if I'm wanting to get away from the systems that the NSA are constantly watching and that governments all over the world are, just soaking up all the metadata and data from, Freenet is really that for me. I didn't think it was the best of the bunch, but you can look into it. Maybe it's exactly what you're looking for. You can do similar. You can write, apps for it and whatever. And it does, and it works. It does work. I don't even think we're at version 1 yet with Freenet, but it does work. And so let's talk about another one. Now, of course, the most common one that people talk about is Tor. Okay. And Tor is, it's an anonymizing layer to some degree, although it does have its own specific servers. But then again, we're talking about the fact that it has servers around the world which can get taken over. Like with Tor, believe me, I recommend using Tor. Tor is great. I'm not knocking Tor. I am just talking about, pros and cons here. With Tor, you have the issue of like where Freedom Hosting in Ireland was raided by the U.S. government. Okay, and who knows what was taken. Tor mail got taken down, all this stuff. Tor is this real hotbed, and there's a lot of people that don't trust Tor because they say, well, it was developed by the Navy, and it got funding from the U.S. government, blah, 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 all of which is somewhat true. And so some people, they don't necessarily trust Tor. But Tor is really, I think it's solid. I think it's great. It has great people at the head of it. Jacob Appelbaum is an anarchist. That's huge, okay? Remember, don't follow the money, follow the attitude. And the attitude is absolutely spot on with Tor. So Tor is a great thing to use. And Tor is not like Freenet or MaidSafe because Tor, operates, it doesn't operate much differently than the internet does. Okay. It has an anonymizing layer where it hides your IP address, essentially. Okay. And we talked about it last week. We talked about the Tor challenge. You can hear more about what that means by listening, by checking that out. And so Tor is a great thing to use. And another thing that is like Tor, that is an anonymizing layer that allows for because Tor has Tor chat that only works on Tor. Again, these things will only work within the Tor protocol, the Tor proxy. All right. You have I2P, which is, it's not really any different than Tor. It's just an alternative to Tor. Now, the nice thing with Tor and I2P, okay, is that these things will work on an Android device, which is different from any of the other technologies I'm going to discuss with you during this segment. Okay, so Tor and I2P would be popular options just because they can work on mobile networks more or less. Okay. Now, again, when these things, something I've noticed recently, and I want to address this issue. Okay. Something I've noticed recently is that when the Tor app is running Orbot, it's called Orbot, which allows for Tor connectivity. on my phone, when the Tor app is running, and if, say, I have everything set to proxy everything through Tor, Skype doesn't work. Also, when I'm running I2P on my Android device, Skype does not work. Now, of course, one should be saying, what the hell are you doing using Skype? Okay, I'm an advertising executive. I have to have a Skype account. Got it? All right. I'm not saying you have to have one. I'm just saying that at the moment I do. And so these are kind of issues that exist with that when you're implementing these things. Now, at least with Tor, you can turn it off to where Skype doesn't get proxied through Tor, and then Skype works fine. But I2P does not allow for that. So I2P is something that's really still under heavy development. It offers a lot of what Tor is talking about. It offers, specific apps to run through I2P. It is an anonymizing layer. It's really slick. Okay. But again, if this is something you're looking to do from an Android device, keep these things in mind that I2P will block off some of the functionalities. As I understand it, I can be wrong. Okay, that's why I have an email address, so that you can correct me. That's not the only reason I have an email address, but anyway. So you have Tor and I2P, which are anonymizing layers. They are internets in and of themselves. Okay. And it's perfectly great, to develop for those and everything. And I think that's awesome. Go ahead and do that, and make use of them. But the one that I've found the most interesting, okay, there's also Bitmessage, which I've talked about Bitmessage in the past, and I was very critical of it. Bitmessage has very much improved recently, drastically improved. So I can also recommend Bitmessage, which is really a messaging service, kind of a subscription email service that runs on a blockchain. Just picture it. It's email that runs on a blockchain. It's pretty cool. The one that really intrigues me, though, is something called Retroshare. Now, I am going to, in the show notes from now on, okay, and I'll do the same thing with Bitmessage. I'll put a Bitmessage address in the show notes, which actually Sovryn Tech was the first show to have, as far as I understand it, that would allow you to contact the show through Bitmessage. I eliminated that ability. I am going to re-implement it. Okay, but the other thing I'm going to implement is my PGP key or should I say GPG key for Retroshare. Now, this is the software I want you to check out. Okay, and Retroshare is phenomenal. It's available for pretty much every system, not Android. It is not available for Android, but OS X, Ubuntu, FreeBSD, Windows, you name it. And this is a client, okay, and it doesn't require any servers or whatever. Everything gets done on your computer, so it's decentralized. It's not like MaidSafe where it's putting, it's sprinkling all the dust, it's sprinkling all the sand all over the box, okay, to where, no one has a complete picture. It does have that, but this is a really, really secure system. It's being actively developed. It's been around since 2006, and they've made some great strides in the past year that have amazed me. And Retroshare, really cool. It's open source, and what it allows for what they call friend-to-friend networking. Okay, where you can, and it can be a darknet as well, because everything's done client side. Okay, on your machine. And Retroshare will allow you, as long as you have your friend's key, as long as you have your friend's public key, you can send them files. You can do like IRC type chats. You can do all this wild stuff with Retroshare. You could create a veritable internet with Retroshare, but again, everybody has to be invited. Everybody kind of has to know each other. That's maybe what some people would say is its flaw. Even Retroshare themselves would tell you that it's kind of a flaw, but that's also the security at the same time. Is that, everybody has to know about it. So if you wanted to make a small system of connectivity, your own personal internet with you and your friends, this is the way to do it, is with Retroshare. And I am going to be implementing a lot of features for Sovryn Tech with Retroshare. Okay, you can do file sharing. You can do everything. You can do, swarming like BitTorrent. All this wild stuff can be done with Retroshare. This is amazing. I don't know why more people aren't using it, but I want you to check it out. Okay, all these systems are great. Use all of them. And there's one point that I'm going to talk about a little bit more during listener email about all these things, is that I don't think that the mobile devices that we use today, I don't mean laptops, I mean the mobile devices, tablets and smartphones, they're not going to allow for a lot of these things to be able to get used, and we need to think about that. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Hey, Brian, what's that funny sticker over your laptop webcam? I was trying to spy on you while you were in the shower, but now I can't.
See, that's why I have it. And it's from EFF.org.
EFF, what's that?
It's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, totally donor-funded organization that fights for internet freedom, privacy.
Wow, that sounds great. So EFF.org, I support internet freedom and privacy, and maybe you do too.
Yeah, and you can support them with Bitcoin.
The Electronic Frontier Foundation at EFF.org. You're a lucky man, Mr. Sovryn. Not many win so well at the game of chance.
That's because it's not a game of chance, Natalia. It's a game of choice.
Game of choice.
It is time for Game of Choice, where I cover a game that I think, maybe went under the radar, something deserves a good reinstall, maybe something that's up and coming or something that never even got developed. And we're just going to take a little break from the seriousness of dark web matters, in talking about this, because this game that the game of choice this week is really something. If you've never experienced it, I recommend you check it out. And the reason that I'm bringing it up, that I'm talking about this week, is that Steam had it on sale for $3. Okay. Now, I don't want you to go out and buy it on Steam necessarily, because it's only available for Windows. That's okay. I don't have a problem with that. But the Steam version, if you have Windows 7 x64 or Windows 8, it doesn't work. The game won't boot up, and you have to do a whole bunch of, you have to make a lot of altercations to get the game to work. And that sucks. Okay. So, I don't want you necessarily to go spending money on it, but you can go ahead and download it. It's available on, cat.ph. It's available on the Pirate Bay and wherever else. And it's Jade Empire. Okay, now Jade Empire, it's an RPG of sorts, kind of a third-person RPG, sort of like Knights of the Old Republic, if you ever played Knights of the Old Republic, or maybe some more of a Neverwinter Nights. Of course, ironically, those are all these games that I just mentioned, including Jade Empire, are made by the inimitable BioWare company. And BioWare is amazing as far as a developer. And Jade Empire, it's really something. This is a game that came out 2007 or so, and then it finally came out for Windows about a year later in 2008. And it's all about, it's a Japanese kind of fantasy game, and you are a student at a proverbial dojo and all this, and it is you. It has a set storyline that you sort of have to go through, kind of like Witcher, but it's very open world and open idea otherwise, it's very open in what you can do. Like, you can become evil, which I always love that in a game, when you can be evil, ironically. And not only that, but this is one of those things that's very unique, where you have relationships, and you can have romantic relationships in the game. And in fact, you can have homosexual romantic relationships. Not only that, you can have polyamorous romantic relationships. In fact, there's a scene where you, as the main character, as the guy, you can be going out with two women at the same time, and there's a cut scene where the three of you run off to the tent. How do you beat that? The game that came out 7 years ago. Woo! Absolutely. So Jade Empire is a lot of fun. And the story's great. The game mechanics are phenomenal. Of course, it's BioWare. They generally do a great job. Not always, but they generally do a great job. And you have a lot of options. Again, the storyline is kind of, it very much handholds you through some of the storyline, but you still have a lot of personal options to choose from. And again, you can choose, you don't have to be a good guy. You can be a bad guy. I remember the first time it was a Jedi Academy. I played the game Jedi Academy, and it actually gave you the option to take over the Empire and be the Empire. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's like, when has a game ever allowed for you to do this? And Jade Empire totally allows for that. And again, it's really such a statement. And I hope they make more of these games, but I wouldn't be shocked if any new ones come out that they won't allow for such looseness in the areas of romance, sadly. But I thought that was fantastic. What game I did a game back when we had the section Game Talk. I did a Game Talk where they talked about how, you don't really have a whole lot of options. But in this one, you can be a lesbian, because you can choose a female character too. The options are endless. It's really something. And so I want you to go ahead. I mean, it originally came out for the original Xbox. So even if you have the newer Xboxes, I'm not sure how you'd play it. Really, the only way to do it is with PC. But I've included in the show notes a link to what is called Jade Empire in Style. And this will add a whole bunch of features to the game that you download, and it will apparently let it work much better. It worked on mine anyway. It will allow the game to work really well, even on an X64-based system. So check that out, Jade Empire in Style. It improves a lot of the graphics too. It's really slick mod, and you want it for this one. Jade Empire, awesome game. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
There are 4 kinds of material that male condoms are made from. The most common is natural latex, which is harvested from rubber trees. Now, latex works well to keep sperm in and sexually transmitted infections out. However, some couples find that it dries out sex, so if you use lubrication, be sure to use lube that says "safe for latex condoms" on the container. There's a man-made form of latex called polyisoprene that's used in condoms like the Lifestyle Skin and the Avanti Bear. It doesn't have a latex smell and is less likely to cause a latex reaction. However, it's still a form of latex, so any lube needs to be safe for latex condoms. If you don't need a condom that's either extra large or extra snug, there's the Trojan Supra. It's made of polyurethane, which is really thin, clear, and transmits body heat extremely well. Now, this can feel great, especially during the first few thrusts of intercourse. Plus, you can use any kind of lube with it. And finally, there are natural lamb condoms made from sheep intestines. Now, think of your penis as a sausage or in a sausage casing, and you get the picture. This kind of condom does not protect from diseases, but it transmits a lot of sensation and can be used with oil-based lube. And quite frankly, I don't know why they don't have a picture of Little Bo Peep on the box.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
You are quite the man, Mr. Sovryn. Are you busy tonight?
Natalia, if you'll excuse me, I just received a very important email.
Later then, Mr. Sovryn. Important email.
It is time for Important Email, where I cover the emails that get sent to me via sovereigntech@riseup.net, or of course you can message me through various means. In fact, the first thing I want to talk about got messaged to me through SoundCloud, which I love. The SoundCloud numbers for the show are the single most important metrics for me, as far as like showing, say if I was schlepping the show off to other networks or whatever, SoundCloud's really key. SoundCloud and Twitter are very important. And SoundCloud offers a messaging service that's fantastic, very simple to use. And yes, you'd have to create a user account. Of course, you can just put in a bunch of bullshit information. You don't have to be, you don't have to put your real info in. And I really like it. I love communicating that way. I like having that hub where people can talk to me through SoundCloud. And of course, now in the future, you can get in touch with me through Retroshare and Bitmessage as well. So, you're going to have more options open to you. And I want you to go to the show notes, sovereigntech.com. Just click on an episode. That's the SoundCloud page. You don't have to have a SoundCloud account to look at the SoundCloud page. Okay. But just to interact with me, you would. And you can look in the show notes and all that info's there. My PGP key, my key for Retroshare, my Bitmessage address, addresses to donate to. It's all right there. Okay. Anyway, and so the correction, I have a correction to make, and that is that Samsung hard drives, this comes from a listener, Samsung hard drives are actually pretty solid. In fact, the person that told me about this said they had fantastic success, and that Samsung actually bought out Seagate. I got it the other way around, and so I stand totally corrected on that, and I'm glad to hear that Samsung drives are that solid. That's fantastic. I mean, my recommendation was, I think last week or the week before, that, like the Western Digital blacks and blues were kind of the way to go. I still hold by that statement, but go ahead and grab a Samsung. I trust this guy's judgment. He's a great guy. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. The next question, listener email I got was, this person is really wanting to do what we've been talking about this whole episode, or through Tech Roulette anyway, and we're going to get back to a little bit of that, is taking control of your privacy. Okay. And so they're saying, look, I'm going to Linux. I'm taking the dive. Which one do I use? And this listener actually wanted to use OnGuard Linux. Okay. And OnGuard Linux, it looks really nice. I have not messed with it personally, but it is a Linux distribution that is certainly has security in mind. Now, nothing wrong with wanting to use that. I think that's fantastic. I want to weigh some pros and cons on it. Okay. And that is that the point why I try to recommend people to use Linux more and more is that from the very core of it, security is in mind. As to where with Windows, that's not the case. Okay. With Windows at the very core is to be a Swiss Army knife. There's benefits to that. The fact that it can handle just about anything that gets thrown at it. Okay, as to where with Linux, everything's so secure, a lot of stuff's got to get really heavily programmed to make sure that it all works together and nothing's doing something that it shouldn't. So when I recommend people use Linux, I mean, that's mainly my thing, is that to get away from, having to have an antivirus, to get away from a lot of the really simple security holes that exist within a Windows system. Okay, people can use Windows, and as long as they know what they're, as long as they have a really good knowledge of what they're doing, okay, as far as wanting to be secure, like they're using Discryptor to encrypt their entire volumes, or they're using Bestcrypt or something like that. Can't use TrueCrypt anymore, or at least I don't recommend it. If you're using these things, there's a lot of best practices that you can put in to using a Windows system to where Windows can be, very secure in and of itself, and you don't have a whole lot to worry about. But a lot of people don't have that knowledge, and that's okay. All right. That's not a problem. But if you don't, that's why I recommend people use Linux, is so that the operating system makes up for that lack of experience with security issues. Okay. And so, OnGuard Linux, I think that's a fantastic thing to go for, but really any Linux, I mean, using Ubuntu, I recommend Ubuntu a lot, even though 14.04 is a clusterfuck. Ubuntu, Fedora, Mint, those are all fine. Elementary is another great one if you want something really easy to use and really beautiful and very easy to install. Elementary OS is awesome. I recommend sticking in the Ubuntu, ecosphere, essentially, which Mint falls into, as does Elementary OS, as does many other Linux distributions. I recommend looking into those because they have really easy app support, and so you can get software installed on them really simplistic. You don't have to know any command line, and you have all that security that comes with Linux. So that's my thoughts on that. And again, as far as like looking good and ease of use, Elementary OS is really taking the cake these days. And I think this is important to be using computers more. This is the topic I wanted to get back to from Tech Roulette, is that I think it's really important to be using computers more so than our mobile devices, because I think the mobile devices, like we mentioned in the first segment, Apple is closing it. It's opening up its ecosystem. It's opening up to developers, but it's closing it into the rest. It's closing it up to the rest of the world, to where it's going to be Apple only. All right. And so they're not going to allow for a lot of these things that we talked about, like Tor. They already don't allow for that. I2P, Freenet, Retroshare, whatever. A lot of that's probably going to get closed down. Okay. And Android is no better. Really, Android is no better. Already Tor has difficulty working in KitKat, in the latest versions of Android, and they just keep closing in. In fact, there was a scare, apparently it wasn't true, but there was a scare that like rooting abilities would no longer be possible, or they wouldn't allow for the benefits that they do with Android devices. Google is closing in on Android to where Android's going to be unless you're using your own version of Android like Amazon does, or if you're using an older version of Android, which you lose some degree of security when you do that, unless you're going to be using, these different distros of Android, Android's not going to be a viable platform anymore for privacy features. Okay, unless you have that mindset and you're using an older version. Google is closing in. All these companies are closing in on their ecosystems. All right, Amazon's doing they're all doing it. They're all doing it. Microsoft Microsoft actually, ironically, might be the system that's not. And of course, Linux in and of itself certainly isn't the system that's closing in on itself. Okay, but these are things to pay attention to. So to be able to use to be able to use technology the way we want to use it, to be able to thwart governments the way we want to thwart them, to be able to have our privacy, which we desire, or to have the connectivity abilities that we desire, laptops, PCs are the only ways that's going to happen. It's not going to happen on our mobile devices. And in fact, I think a case could be made that a lot of people might be realizing that, because, we have kids, they're growing up in the mobile ready world. And I think they're going to get over the mobile ready world very quickly, and they're going to want something real, because that's the way they think of Snapchat. But they're just, because they've already had it, they're not going to moonlight this whole mobile world as much. Or, when I say mobile, a laptop is technically mobile, yes, but I don't mean that. I'm talking about the device in your pocket or something. Maybe Ubuntu OS will be the solution to that, or Firefox OS will be the solution to this whole problem. But please do not rely on Android and Apple for your privacy. Okay, unless you trust Apple and you trust Google. If you do that, then yeah, go Chromebook, go Android. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but just keep in mind, you're not taking control of your own privacy. You are handing it over to somebody else. Okay. And that's all right. That's your choice. So, because, again, I think these companies are in a very real sense, I think they want to take over the world, and they're not the first one. And let me tell you who the first one is. We just mentioned who they were, and that's Microsoft. And I got a listener email here. Okay, that it was a funny listener email. Love the show, all the good stuff. And then they said, tell me a story. Tell me a sad story. And so I want to share with you what I consider perhaps the saddest story in recent history, perhaps the saddest story in the tech industry, certainly. And the story is Bill Gates. I don't hate Bill Gates. I actually I looked up to him when I was younger, still do at times. Yes, people are going to say, holy shit, he's euthanizing the world. He's depopulating everybody, blah, blah. Okay, all right, fine, whatever. Let's move on, shall we? Bill Gates, in the 90s, Windows really took over the world. Okay. In fact, people say, well, now Apple has taken over the world. No, calm down. Apple, OS X installs. How many people use Apple? 40 million people around the entire world, maybe 80 million at best. Depending on what metric you're using, it's between 40 and 80 million people. Out of billions of computers out there, 40 to 80 million people are the only ones using Apple, or are using OS X. We're not talking about iOS. Yeah, you're not really... Glad you're making billions of dollars, but you're making it off of iOS, not off your desktops. So most of the world still uses Windows, but certainly in the 90s, nobody argued with the fact that Bill Gates was, conquering the world, because every computer, every industry, every enterprise was using Windows, whatever version that happened to be. Okay. And in fact, in 1994, and this may have done Bill Gates in 1994, there's a quote where when Bill Clinton was announced as president, where Bill Gates laughs and says, I'm more powerful than the president. And I think he was right. At that time, in the 90s, he absolutely was the most powerful man on the planet. He was the richest man on the planet, too, or at least in America. And back then, now it seems like companies can just do these meteoric billion-dollar rises out of nowhere, every day, like Google or whoever. But back then, for a company that started in the 80s to by 1995 to be, literally in everybody's home around the developed world, was an unheard of story. in the history of business. Okay. And Bill Gates literally was ruling the world. He took it over. And I think in 1998, the U.S. government said, that's enough. And so you end up with this case, the United States versus Microsoft, that ends up going from 1998 to 2001. Now, the whole case was about essentially Internet Explorer was getting, was baked into Windows. You couldn't remove Internet Explorer. Or you could, but there would be issues, like suddenly Windows would run slow and there'd be all these problems. Okay. And so, and then supposedly, because you only had this is just at the beginning of the internet around there. This is a little before 98. Okay. When the case starts getting made against Microsoft, against Bill Gates, you had Netscape Navigator, which was the, one web browser, and then you had Internet Explorer. And those were the two web browsers out there. There wasn't a Firefox. There wasn't a Chrome at the time. And Netscape Navigator was trying to, was really the first web browser. I mean, it was there before IE. It was really it was the one. Okay. And so, obviously Bill Gates, smart guy, sees the internet's potential. And you can watch interviews with Charlie Rose and whoever from back in that time. Bill Gates knew where the internet was going. He knew the democratic process that the internet allowed for. And so some people will say he very assholishly inserted Internet Explorer to where it had to work with Windows. You had no choice. You had to use Windows. And there may be, however all true that is, who knows? Mark Andreessen tells his story, but frankly, I think Mark Andreessen's an asshole, especially the way he talks about Bitcoin these days. Yeah, libertarians, it was nice. Thank you for getting Bitcoin to where it is today, but get out of here. The real money's here. What a jerk. Anyway, so there's this case made against the idea that, with Internet Explorer being so intricately laced with Windows 95, 98 at the time, that they were breaking antitrust laws. And the fact that Microsoft wouldn't open up its APIs to where other people could write in to, use a lot of the internet capabilities that Windows had at the time. So, this huge case gets made against him. And again, there's, how true it is that Microsoft is strong-arming companies like Compaq and others to, no, you can't, because this was the claim, is that Microsoft was telling these companies, if you put Netscape on your computers by default, you're not getting a Windows license from us. How true all that is, I think maybe up to some degree of debate. But even if it is true, that's not what this is about. That's not what the United States versus Microsoft was about. I think that this was about someone getting a little too powerful. And I mean, because again, this is a guy who said, hey, I'm more powerful than the president. This is a guy who didn't, and I mean, and you can read some of the case in the United States versus Microsoft, and Microsoft was being a dick to the government, and I mean, he did not like them at all. This was one of the most one of the most powerful anti-government pushes in history, anti-US government, I should say. It was amazing. Bill Gates was not going to apologize for what he was doing. He was not going to bend to their will. But then what does the United States government do? I mean, they just went full force on this guy. And literally there's tons of reports that Bill Gates was brought to tears. What the fuck is the United States government doing, bringing a businessman to tears? Over the fact, and this was the whole thing, over the fact that, yes, the browser is intricately laced with the operating system, and this creates an antitrust issue. This is a monopoly. And you want me to tell you just how much bullshit that is? Where is the United States government against Google? Chrome OS, anybody? Hello? McFly, hello? Chrome OS, The operating system's a browser. If that was an illegal thing to do, if that was such a goddamned issue, then Larry Page and Sergey Brin should be brought to tears. I don't want that to happen. I'm just saying that this is bullshit. What this was a government fearing for its life because an industry was proving that the government wasn't needed at all. They brought Bill Gates to tears. And suddenly what happens? Now, the case ends in 2001. There's no breakup of Microsoft that was constantly threatened. Microsoft opens up its APIs. Microsoft doesn't have to separate Internet Explorer from Windows. I mean, the EU forces them to do that, and then you end up with the Windows N system, right? You know, Windows XP N and all this stuff. That doesn't have it in there. But even then, boy, where's the EU on Chrome OS? Come on. Anyway, this was all about, in my opinion, and it is so sad because then suddenly, after this case happens, suddenly Bill Gates, he starts touting off all this government bullshit as to where before he didn't care. He was just talking about improving the genuine quality of life. That was his whole, there's a video you can watch where he talked about the 1999 home, what the home would look like, with Microsoft at the head of it. People can crack their jokes about Microsoft, whatever, that's fine. Go ahead. Ha ha ha. Okay. But suddenly Microsoft just does this total, and Bill Gates himself does this complete 180 in attitude where suddenly he's so concerned about the United Nations. Suddenly he's so concerned about the United States. And he's so concerned about this and this and this, when this guy beforehand was the most selfish prick on planet Earth. And I think that's great that he was. I like that attitude sometimes, especially when you're interconnecting the world in the way that that Windows really did. And then a government had to break them. It's all speculation that that's why it happened. But I think it's accurate. And I think it's just all the more reason that we need to get into decentralized systems so that way there's no head, there's nobody for the government to point the gun at to put a stop to it all. Satoshi Nakamoto is a genius for being anonymous to keep this kind of shit from happening again.
Hey, look! Got an energy spike. Pull back! Launch. Bombing the Narn back to the Stone Age wasn't enough for you?
Then we heard it. The sound of something terrible being born.
This is madness. Station 3 to Commander Ivanova.
Centauri have launched a full-scale assault.
Time is coming on! It's our turn now!
2 million tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. A world where empires rise and fall, where dreams are born and die, where war and hatred are challenged by love and faith. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity. It is our last, best hope for peace, for victory, for freedom. It is Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5. Agent Sovryn, go to this webpage and follow. What kind of webpage is this? Is that Natalia? I better go to the
Website of the Week.
Woo, boy. All right. I don't know if we're going to exactly calm down a little bit, but let's get to Website of the Week. Please, you can email me and tell me if you think I'm way off base on anything I've talked about in this episode. But I think you're going to see that there's a picture getting painted, and that picture might be pretty clear. Anyway, let's talk about more actionable things, more things that we can do right now to solve all this bullshit going on in the tech world. And for this Website of the Week, I want you to go to openwireless.org. Okay. And this is partly being pushed by the EFF, but a whole bunch of other companies, Mozilla, the Internet Archive, Open Garden, I think, is actually supporting this as well. The open wireless movement. Okay. And I'll read right from the website here. So imagine a future with ubiquitous open internet. We envision a world where in any urban environment, dozens of open networks are available at your fingertips. Tablets, watches, and other new devices can automatically join these networks to do nifty things. The social expectation is one of sharing, and as a result, wireless internet is more efficient. The false notion that an IP address could be used as a sole identifier is finally a thing of the past, creating a privacy-enhancing norm of shared networks. We're working with a coalition of volunteer engineers to build technologies that will let users open their wireless networks without compromising their security or sacrificing bandwidth. And we're working with advocates to help change the way people and businesses think about internet service. This is awesome. There's whole towns out there now that are actually doing this. They may not be particularly with openwireless.org, because a router that actually, or a network that is actually, part of openwireless.org will be named openwireless.org, which is a good idea. I think there's some degree of perhaps maybe legal protections you could take advantage of if it's an openwireless.org router or whatever. This is fantastic, but there's whole towns out there that are doing this to where it's a comedy of the commons, to where the more people that add these open networks out there, it's almost like Tor. All your networks are just exit relays that anybody can pretty much use. And hell, so this person went and bought drugs using my network, using this network, no longer can, they raid one place because they're like, hey, look, I have an open network. I don't have a password on my router. I didn't use that. Now, there have been cases, fair warning. There have been cases where someone was using someone else's open router, open network, to do nefarious things, or what are labeled as nefarious. And the person who owned the network got into legal trouble. That's true. But again, this is the case where if just suddenly out of nowhere everybody does this, what are they going to do? Who are you going to arrest? You're going to arrest everybody with a wireless router? I think this is fantastic, but it takes a mass. It takes a bunch of people to really do it, because if you're just like the only house in town that does it, then, someone, some kid or who, whatever, I don't use kid as a pejorative, will, just want to torrent off of it, and then you'll lose your internet speed. So it requires a whole bunch of people doing that to really make it efficient to where people don't lose everything. But I think this is fantastic. This is just an easy, simple, no software solution to anonymize the world. Okay? And having this solves the issue also where I said is like, look, don't be trusting these mobile devices, at least not with the proprietary bullshit, OSs that are getting forced on you. Okay. But you could use, if you had open wireless everywhere, you could carry around, a really small netbook or laptop or whatever and do your business. And I think that's fantastic. So I want you to check out openwireless.org. I want you to consider doing it. But if you're going to do this, I recommend you talk to your neighbors. Hey, whether you're doing openwireless.org or not, I recommend you talk to your neighbors. Okay. Let people know if you're an activist for, crypto anarchy and privacy and all that stuff, let people know you're a cool person. That way it's not so strange when who knows what happens. All right. So talk to your neighbors and maybe try and convince them, get them on board with it. Don't go full bore and just come out of nowhere with it, but just say, hey, you ever think about this? And then see about doing it. I'd love to hear whole neighborhoods doing this sort of thing. I think that'd be amazing. Okay. Or if you live near a restaurant, go ahead and do it then and talk to the restaurant and say, why don't you just open it up? You know what I mean? And have it be called openwireless.org. Let's be serious about this. Let's do something that, that really gives us some genuine anonymity and freedom. And I think that this allows for it. This is very important. The IP address thing, that is such a huge freaking issue. No question about it. And this is a great solution to that. So openwireless.org, check it out. We're talking about all kinds of things you can do this episode, okay, right now to get your privacy back and to take the digital world back over.
Hey everybody, it's Stephanie. I am the Sovryn Tech producer, but did you know I am also a voiceover artist? Yes, it's true. I make audiobooks, commercials for your business. I narrate explainer videos, pretty much any audio project that you can think of, I'm probably willing to work on it, or I have worked on it in the past. And if you want to hear some samples of my previous work, or you want to find out a little bit more about what I do, then I encourage you to check out my voiceover website, which is smvoice.info, smvoice.info. Now back to Sovryn Tech.
Ride a bike so well.
I don't know if I can get us away from that helicopter. Don't you have a gun?
Oh, there's never a need for lethal force. I'll handle this.
How did you do that?
We'll be fine. A quick hack solves everything.
Hacksec.
It is time for Hacksec, where we talk about security issues and we talk about hackers all around the world. And boy, talk about all around the world. We've got some crazy shit happening in Iraq. And this is not funny, but it's ironic how suddenly, oh yeah, we're pulling the troops out of Iraq. That's what President Obama said, right? They're leaving, and then suddenly this quote unquote terrorist group called ISIS comes in and starts taking over cities in Iraq. Just a few thousand people start taking over, major cities in the country, and then Iraq says, hey, we're open to the U.S. giving us a hand again here. Right, like we left Iraq, the U.S. never leaves anywhere. As someone that was in the military, and in fact, someone asked me in a listener email to talk about, my military experience a bit and getting out of it, and to what I can talk about, I will get to that in a important email segment in the future. And so anyway, this is just crazy. So what's happening in Iraq because of this? Veritable civil war that's going on, or I guess maybe they would say it's an invading group because ISIS is coming from Syria in part, it would seem. So I don't know if you would classify this technically as a civil war. But the Republic of Iraq today blocked Twitter, and this is as of yesterday, blocked Twitter, Google, YouTube, Facebook, and other sites in response to the uprising of the Islamic State of Iraq in the Levant, because of ISIS. Okay. And the story I have here in the show notes is from VentureBeat, and VentureBeat did get claims back from Google and Twitter saying that, yes, we are aware of the problem. And that's all they've said, is that they're aware of the problem. And it's so funny because these are, and I'll make a couple points here. It's so funny because these are the very reasons that so many people say that social media is so goddamned important, is because when something's going wrong, you can tell people about it. No, you can't. Not when the government just starts turning all the services off. Okay, so obviously this brings up the case. This is why you use Tor. This is why you use I2P. This is why you use whatever you use, okay? If you want to use Freenet, or you want to use, MaidSafe when it comes out, or if you want to use Retroshare, okay? Because they're not blocking those. I mean, you can't. Essentially, I mean, you really can't. So it makes the case for using all of those things that I listed off. It also makes the case. In fact, there's another one that I didn't even get to, Twister, which actually Sovryn Tech is on Twister. Twister is a decentralized Twitter. How important would that be to what's going on in Iraq right now? That'd be huge, because you could have all those updates, and it's a Twitter that runs on blockchain technology, essentially. Okay, I'll put the links to the show notes to all these different things so you can go and check them out. But Sovryn Tech's already on Twister. You can just go, just like on Twitter, it's at Sovryn Tech. Okay, and you can find me on Twister. Twister's the installs, it's kind of an alpha stage, but you can see the importance of such a thing. Because I agree, yes, Twitter and Facebook and all these things, with Arab Spring, they did help bring down a government. I think that is unquestionable. But I've also made the statement many times on this show, on Free Talk Live and others, where I said, this is never going to be allowed to happen again. And clearly this is the case. That doesn't mean it's still, maybe it'll still work. Maybe if we use the more decentralized ones like Twister, like Retroshare, okay, and whatever else, then maybe they can still happen. All right. But by and large, those services en masse are not going to be allowed to get used, and they're not. Same thing was happening in Turkey. Okay. And it's really, I know the government made the internet. Okay. This is true. This is an inarguable fact. The government invented the internet as we know it. Or at least they laid the groundwork and for the technology. Obviously, they didn't come up with the great uses that we've come up with it for. But they really they tossed it off. They said, okay, here, private industry, colleges, if you can use this, go ahead, and use it, blah, 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 whatever. And they just stopped caring. And of course, now they care very much again. Some want to lay out a conspiracy saying that they always cared and that they knew exactly what they were doing. I don't think they can plan that far ahead. At least not from the 60s till now, from the 80s till now, maybe, but not from the 60s, which is really when, hypertext and all this stuff sort of came into being. It's interesting, though, to point out that a lot of the issues, the privacy, the censorship issues that are going on around the world are not really new. And to prove that they're not really new, I want to read something to you. And it's from 1996, February 8th, 1996. And this is by John Perry Barlow, who was instrumental in the creation of the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And this is a declaration of the independence of cyberspace. And I want to read it to you. Governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. That's M-I-N-D. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. We have no elected government, nor are we likely to have one, so I address you with no greater authority than that which liberty itself always speaks. I declare the global social space we are building to be naturally independent of the tyrannies you seek to impose on us. You have no moral right to rule us, nor do you possess any methods of enforcement we have true reason to fear. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. You have neither solicited nor received ours. We did not invite you. You do not know us, nor do you know our world. Cyberspace does not lie within your borders. Do not think that you can build it as though it were a public construction project. You cannot. It is an act of nature, and it grows itself through our collective actions. You have not engaged in our great and gathering conversation, nor did you create the wealth of our marketplaces. You do not know our culture, our ethics, or the unwritten codes that already provide our society more order than could be obtained by any of your impositions. You claim there are problems among us that you need to solve. You use this claim as an excuse to invade our precincts. Many of these problems don't exist. Where there are real conflicts, where there are wrongs, we will identify them and address them by our means. We are forming our own social contract. This governance will arise according to the conditions of our world, not yours. Our world is different. Cyberspace consists of transactions, relationships, and thought itself, arrayed like a standing wave in the web of our communications. Ours is a world that is both everywhere and nowhere, but it is not where bodies live. We are creating a world that all may enter without privilege or prejudice, accorded by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth. We are creating a world where anyone, anywhere, may express his or her beliefs, no matter how singular, without fear of being coerced into silence or conformity. Tell me all this isn't getting broken right now. And this shot got called in 96. I'll read on. Our identities have no bodies, so unlike you, we cannot obtain order by visual coercion. We believe that from ethics, enlightened self-interest, and the Commonwealth, our governance will emerge. Our identities may be distributed across many of your jurisdictions. The only law that all our constituent cultures would generally recognize is the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have done unto you, right? We hope we will be able to build our particular solution on that basis, but we cannot accept the solutions you are attempting to impose. In the United States, you have today created a law, the Telecommunications Reform Act, which repudiates your own Constitution and insults the dreams of Jefferson, Washington, Mill, Madison, de Tocqueville, and Brandeis. These dreams must now be born anew in us. This net neutrality, all this stuff, it's old hat. You are terrified of your own children, since they are natives in a world where you will always be immigrants. Because you fear them, you entrust your bureaucracies with the parental responsibilities you are too cowardly to confront yourselves. In our world, all the sentiments and expressions of humanity, from the debasing to the angelic, are parts of a seamless whole, the global conversation of bits. We cannot separate the air that chokes from the air upon which wings beat. In China, Germany, France, Russia, Singapore, Italy, and the United States, you are trying to ward off the virus of liberty by erecting guard posts at the frontiers of cyberspace. These, just like Iraq's doing right now, these may keep out the contagion for a small time, but they will not work in a world that will soon be blanketed in bit-bearing media. Your increasingly obsolete information industries would perpetuate themselves by proposing laws in America and elsewhere that claim to own speech itself throughout the world. These laws would declare ideas to be another industrial product, no more noble than pig iron. In our world, whatever the human mind may create can be reproduced and distributed infinitely at no cost. The global conveyance of thought no longer requires your factories to accomplish. These increasingly hostile and colonial measures place us in the same position of those previous lovers of freedom and self-determination who had to reject the authorities of distant, uninformed powers. We must declare our virtual selves immune to your sovereignty. Even as we continue to consent to your rule over our bodies, we will spread ourselves across the planet so that no one can arrest our thoughts. We will create a civilization of the mind in cyberspace. May it be more humane and fair than the world your governments have made before. Woo! Yeah. What can you add to that? This is what all this stuff's all about. The net neutrality, NSA, what's going on in Iraq, where, for your security, we must block off YouTube. Bullshit. But don't think this is new. Don't think that somehow there was some degree of a paradise island that once existed. That is still something being created. And it will be created by using services that these people know nothing about. I don't care what Tau team they have at the NSA. They know nothing about it. They can't keep up. No small group of people could keep up because so many are going to start using these technologies and more technologies are going to come out. And then all this stuff that's happening around the world is the lies won't be able to get spread anymore by governments. I'll be back with more. Hey, everybody. I really appreciate all of you that listen to Sovryn Tech. I hope you have as much fun listening to the show as I do making it. And hey, if you have a good time listening or learn something from listening, you can donate to the show. Just look in the show notes at sovereigntech.com. There you'll see addresses for Bitcoin, Blackcoin, Next, Litecoin, whole slew of ways to donate to the show. And believe me, I'm not going to complain if you only send 2 millibits or what equates to $2, unlike some people. But, also you can donate via PayPal using the affiliate links on the left-hand side of sovereigntech.com. And yes, please feel free to use those affiliate links. You can also help the show by circling me on Google+, following me on Twitter, or following Sovryn Tech on SoundCloud. Anything you can do to help, believe me, it helps. So I love all of you, and thank you so much for listening. Now let's get back to more Sovryn Tech. Well, looks like we made it out of the country. Good driving. Let's find some place to relax.
Somewhere with a nice big bed, I think. Let me pull up an app.
Sounds good to me.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover a piece of software that might be useful. Sometimes it's terrible. Just something for you to check out either way or to stay away from. So, in the theme, in keeping with the spirit of the show, the theme of the show, of this week's show, this is one I want to talk about. I knew I wouldn't be able to get to it during Tech Roulette. Okay. There's so many of these peer-to-peer technologies, these decentralized technologies out there that are really, fantastic, that, there's no way I could cover all of them. And I hope I've given you at least a picture of ones to check out. And there's one that I wanted to do separately because this is really something that, it doesn't fit in with the cross-platform nature of all the other ones I discussed, like Twister and Retroshare, and I2P and others. Okay. But this is only for Windows, and it's actually a Japanese program. And this is a bit of a rarity. This was created in 2006, and it's called Perfect Dark. No relation to the classic N64 game. And it's something that's still being very highly developed. It's only available in a couple languages right now, and that's Japanese and English. In fact, the English version didn't come out until 2008. And it's pretty slick, and it's still being actively developed. Latest version came out, actually April of this year, 2014. I think it's, Wrath, it's called, version 1.18. And it allows for, quite a few different things to be done. And one of its flaws is we talked about how, technologies like MaidSafe and Freenet, how they require a certain amount of space, hard drive space from you. With those, as far as I know, you can choose whatever you want. But with Perfect Dark, you have to give up 40 gig. Okay. And certainly in 2006, this was a little bit of an issue for some people because even then 80 gig was the standard hard drive at the time. So you're giving up half of your hard disk space. And it also, it's odd in that it requires NTFS, which is, hard drives have various formats that they come in. Okay. And most operating systems can read various formats, like there's FAT32, there's exFAT, FAT16, all different kinds. And NTFS is specifically, that's that's Microsoft's in particular, which even they're running away from now, ironically. But Perfect Dark to work requires NTFS to function. Okay. So this does a lot of what we've been talking about, and it's been in development for a long time. Okay. It allows for file sharing. That's kind of its main purpose is file sharing, but it does allow for some degree, of, messaging within it and some other things. And it is, I don't think a whole lot of people, it's not like an avenue that a whole lot of, government organizations, I imagine, would be watching. And it's certainly more secure than torrenting itself, because that's, it's one complaint that we'll get sometimes is with VPN services. In fact, we talk about openwireless.org. That is certainly still a call. If you're going to have an open wireless network, that's still a call to make sure, especially if you're using an open wireless network that's not your own, to have a VPN running. VPN services still, even like one of the best in the world, proxpn.com, use the code FTL20, get 20% off. ProXPN, they still have to send you an email. Okay. That says, hey, you're torrenting or whatever, please remove the software. ProXPN is not going to take any action other than that. Okay. They're just following through whatever laws exist because the server you were using must have been in a country where that was an issue. Okay. Perfect Dark will certainly skirt past all that. That doesn't mean still don't use a VPN. Please use a VPN. All right. But I'm just saying that Perfect Dark is a good way to get out of that. And Perfect Dark does offer a lot of, I'll say, rarer bits of data than you would find on a lot of torrent websites. And so that may be of interest to you. So anyway, I don't know how far Perfect Dark will keep going with a lot of things like MaidSafe and others getting developed. Okay. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. Okay. I want to make sure that I was trying to be as comprehensive as I could be. I mean, I can't talk about everything. Couldn't talk about GNU.net. There's a whole bunch I couldn't talk about. Okay, but Perfect Dark is out there if you are a Windows user. And that's important to keep in mind. I mean, a good chunk of the world is obsessed with Windows. People don't realize that. where in America, it seems like, oh yeah, real people use Apple and, and all this stuff. That's not so true across, around the world. So if you have a Windows machine, if you have an NTFS, formatted hard drive, maybe you want to check out Perfect Dark. It does a lot of what we've been talking about. And if they keep in adding features, I mean, it could do a lot of what Freenet does. So anyway, I thought I'd mention it. I like it. There's a link in the show notes, and on the webpage, make sure you have a translator available because it is in Japanese. Okay. So keep that in mind, but you can grab it. Again, it just got updated, a couple months ago, and it works really well. So Perfect Dark. I'll be back with more. This is Sovereign Tech.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Oh, Natalia.
Oh, it feels so good. I'm so close.
I know what you need.
The climax.
It is time for the climax, where I talk about really whatever I want to talk about. And, it doesn't even have to be science or tech related. It could be a book, it could be a TV show, it could be a movie, it could be a topic, it could be poetry, it could be anything. In fact, last week, boy, wasn't that a hell of a topic. I didn't even get to everything I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the advantages of hunter languages when I was mentioning about what the Paleolithic world may have been like and how peaceful it was and the reasons that may have been, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I got to stop saying blah, blah, blah. This week, I want to talk about really a cultural phenomenon that seemed to have occurred, and that is Cosmos. Now, I can't exactly remember, but I'm pretty sure I talked about the original Cosmos that Carl Sagan did in 1980 for what the Climax used to be, which is Pick of the Week. Maybe a year or year and a half back, I think I might have done Cosmos. So, but recently there was not really a remake, but more, I guess, it's a follow-up, they like to call it. And I think that's good of them to call it a follow-up, because you really can't remake the magic that Carl Sagan really presented with the original Cosmos. It was just a once in a century production. Nothing that incredible really will ever come again. Though I got to admit, the new Cosmos was pretty good. At first, I was a little critical of it. I thought that they were skipping some things, but then I guess they were just saving some of the best for last as far as the show goes. So I don't know if you've caught it. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't know what exactly I could give away. I mean, it's like, it's all about what's actually happening now and what has happened in the past. So it's not like there's spoilers, It's like, well, you didn't know this, but, whoever did something and blah, 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 and whatever. So no spoiler alert. I don't know how that could possibly be. Anyway, I'll admit I was concerned, and I've expressed this on the show. I was concerned about the new Cosmos being perhaps pushing some degree of agenda, whoever's agenda that may be. I was concerned that because this was being put out by Fox, that there was essentially money behind it and that money needed to be made, as to where the original Cosmos was made on PBS and it was all relatively, funding that, the original Cosmos, I watched it when I was a very religious person as a kid, and even my dad, who's, incredibly religious still to this day, loved it. So it could appeal to really everybody. And even though it was certainly at points damning to religion, the original Cosmos was. And this one, the new Cosmos, of course, this time hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson instead of Carl Sagan, at points might have been a little critical of religion, but it wasn't too harsh. And so I didn't really feel like there was a whole ton of agenda there. It hit all the right marks. It was beautifully, the production was absolutely beautiful. The Starship of Imagination that in the original Cosmos was essentially it was like, it looked like a crystal kind of snowflakey type thing. That they actually, like in this case now, it was, like this beautiful, like sliced shaped, teardrop shaped starship, and it's really gorgeous. I loved that. And that they were kind of traveling around showing you the universe and going throughout history and all this stuff is really something. And of course, Seth MacFarlane was involved, and he did a lot of animation, and the animation was really well done. Andrian and Steven Soder were involved in this as well. Of course, they were part of the original creative team for the original Cosmos. So I thought they were very respectful. And in just about every episode, they would play a quote, or they would talk about Carl Sagan at least, or whatever. So all the proper respect, in my opinion, was paid. It was really, really good. And they talked about some things. The beauty of the original Cosmos was that they intermixed history with modern science, with theoretical science. What some would say science of the future. And this show did that as well. And it did it quite well. I was very pleased at how they delivered that. In fact, they even talked about people that shockingly they talked about other historical figures that shockingly the original Cosmos did not, or not shockingly, maybe it was just information that wasn't so readily available, newer discoveries, whatever. They talked about Moshi or Mosu. It depends. Mox, there's a bunch of different ways his name was said. But Mosu was not, it sounds a lot like Sun Tzu, right? But they were actually really the opposite ends of each other. Mosu was this, Chinese, he wasn't a general, but a Chinese statesman, we'll say. But he was a brilliant tactician, but he firmly believed in peace. And he did everything he could to make sure that there was peace and tried to achieve peace in every possible way. He was a fascinating person to learn about. He may have created the first theater, hundreds of years ago, or the first movie theater, I should say. Obviously, there's been, something reminiscent of Broadway theater for quite some time. And that was cool to hear about him. And to hear about, Moism, essentially, which was his theories, which are interesting to study. There's not a lot known because, much like Library of Alexandria, a lot of what Moism taught was burned. And so hearing about Mozu was fascinating. There was also a lot of respect paid, I thought, to women and their involvement in the development of science. So many people were talked about, and you found out the incredible contributions that women have made throughout history to the field of science and understanding our universe. And that was really enjoyable to see and great to have out there. So it was really well done. Again, no one could argue about the beauty of it. And Alan Silvestri did the score. While granted, Alan Silvestri is not Vangelis, he did a great job. I thought the score was very beautiful, almost poetic. And soft at times that just, it was really required, I thought, for what was going on, and, soft and epic at the same time, which is really a hard balance to pull off, but Silvestri did it. So good for him. And it had at the end of it, showing how science got to where it is, and, all the developments that we've made. And it talked about, oh, this was so great. It even admitted that the Big Bang may not have been what created our universe. It talked about the fourth dimensional black hole. Real quick, it was just a quick shot, but it talked about it, and I thought that was fabulous. That they even bothered to mention that, and that helps keep the show current. Same thing happened with the 1980s Carl Sagan Cosmos. Was that he speculated, but he speculated so well with some newly getting worked out theories that it ended up still being a very current show. Like it was almost prophetic at times. And I think we'll find that this new Cosmos is as well. So, but I wanted to talk about, because at the end of it, Neil deGrasse Tyson lays out, he says, no, look, and this is getting into the idea that, science is a way of thinking and it's a lifestyle and all that. And of course, some people will come out and say, science is a religion. It's just, it doesn't have a God or whatever. And I think that's nonsense that science is a religion. I get the quote, who said that? Was it Konstantin Huygens that said science, the world is my playground, science is my religion. Or not, maybe that would have been Constantine Huygens, not Christian Huygens. That was Christian Huygens' dad. Anyway, I get that, but when people are saying science is just another religion, they're using that as a pejorative, and I think that's nuts. But they had at the end of the show, they beautifully played in the very last episode. They beautifully played a quote, the pale blue dot quote from Carl Sagan, where he's saying, "Look, it's so funny how you have all these people, governments and whatever else, that think they're so important. And yet in the grand scheme of things, that being the cosmos and the universe, they're just this little mote of dust. They're this little pale blue dot. And they're so meaningless." And I think this is where a lot of, spiritualism comes in, where people think that they're connected to the entire universe, because I think they feel unsettled that they are so small. When it comes into the, when you break into the realm of science, you realize just how small you are in the universe. But being small doesn't mean you're still not precious, and that's important. And you are, because especially in my opinion, when I think that complex life, keyword complex. I don't think complex life is common in the universe. In fact, we might be the only ones. If you believe in the great filter, we may be the only ones. And that's why we haven't encountered any others. Okay. And you can look up the great filter if you want to hear, or you can email me too, and I can talk about the great filter if you want, but I'm not going to get into that now. But the show ended off beautifully with that statement. And then also it laid out, it said, these are the 5 precepts. These are the 5 ideas to keep in mind when you are trying to learn about the cosmos and as you travel through the cosmos. And when they say cosmos, they mean everything, the earth, the whole shtick. And I thought these were pretty great. And so I want to read these to you because, ironically, I consider them the precepts for sovereign tech to some degree, as this is a science and tech show, show about science and technology and how it can set you free, right? So number 1, and this is number 1, and maybe it's the single most important one, but question authority. Oh, yes. Always question authority. That was so beautiful to hear Neil deGrasse Tyson say. Question authority. Question it all. That was his point. It's question everything. Okay. Number 2, think for yourself. I mean, you think these were obvious, right? But then how many people don't think for themselves? We've talked about that on this show. Number 3, question yourself. Number 4, don't believe anything just because you want to. Test ideas by the evidence gained from observation and experience. Follow that evidence wherever it leads. And if you have no evidence, reserve judgment. That's so beautifully put. Test everything. Don't believe something just because you want to. Boy, how many people do that? You got to test it by some evidence. Now, like we were talking last week about the Paleolithic world, I have evidence. That doesn't mean that I have, that my evidence is the only evidence. There's evidence that tells another story too, but you got to test it. And I didn't want to talk about that, that idea, that theory, until I had a whole bunch of evidence. And I had a lot more than I and the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy talked about. Okay. But yeah, test everything. And then number 5, and this is the most important, and I love it when I get emails telling me this, but remember, you can be wrong. And that is so true. In fact, Carl Sagan, not Neil deGrasse Tyson, but Carl Sagan actually said there is when you study history especially, it's so clear that incredible brilliance, intellectual brilliance is not a guarantee that you aren't dead wrong. And that is really important to keep in mind. I think some people get held up to this incredible intellectual height, and they can still be dead wrong. And it happens in the liberty movement, anarchists, where people you think don't collectivize and think for themselves. Well, I know quite a few thousand, at least, that don't think for themselves. So follow those 5 rules, and I agree. I think you'll get through life just fine. And you'll come to a lot of amazing conclusions that will make you depressed at first, but then you'll be happy in the end. So check out the new Cosmos. I recommend it. I enjoyed it. I'll see you next week. Carpe Lucem. See you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.